We are joined in the studio by the South African ambassador to the Russian Federation, Mzov Makitka. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Fiorella. It's my pleasure.
It's a pleasure to have you. And so what is the current scale of the cooperation between South Africa and Russia, and how do you evaluate the recent developments in the relations between the two states?
They are extremely huge. And we are reaching milestones by the year. If you recall, last week, Minister Sergei Lavrov was invited by our Minister for International Relations and Cooperation, Dr. Naledi Pandor, to visit South Africa. And on the 23rd of January, with a huge delegation from Russia. A very successful visit indeed. Milestones have been reached in discussing the key strategic objectives that we are looking forward to, which I'm sure we will talk about later.
Yeah, so you mentioned the foreign minister. That was the first destination in point, South Africa was. How do you evaluate the outcome of that visit?
The outcome, Fiorella, was quite great. And the visit itself was successful. And if you recall, the Minister Lavrov visited the northern part of the continent in July last year. And we were looking forward for the minister to visit our region. And it was for that reason that both countries agreed that the visit of Minister Lavrov should not only be to South Africa, but should touch a number of SADC countries. And that was the reason why the minister visited South Africa, visited Eswatini, visited Angola. Those were the 3 SADC countries that he visited.
Well, you talk about all these visits. The Western media has been writing nonstop about the possible Russian influence, albeit negatively, growing in Africa. What do you make of their statements?
Fiorella, I would not want to go too much into the statements that is being made by third countries. The key thing for us, it's the relationship between the two countries. How do we see it? And there is no doubt in our assessment that the bilateral relationships between the two countries is great. And of course, it's understandable that third parties will have their own opinions, negative or positive.
How do the people then, on that note, in South Africa view President Vladimir Putin? Does he have anything in common with President Ramaphosa?
Yes, there are quite a number of things that are in common between the two presidents. One of the commonalities between the two presidents is that both of them are members of the BRICS group of countries. So that's number one. But also number two, the commonality is because of the historical and the present relationships between the two countries. One recall that South Africa was the first country in 1991 that recognized the Russian Federation, the first country in Africa that recognized. So as a result of that, the relationship over the past, 30 years between the two countries and, of course, between the two presidents is great. The two have talked about, 5 times in the past 12 to 18 months.
Now going to an important topic, how Africa in general has been affected, but how has strongly South Africa been affected from these Western sanctions against Russia, especially the ones in the agricultural sector? Do they create certain obstacles for their relations?
No, it doesn't. And I can assure you, Fiorella, that there are no obstacles to the relations. And to us, from the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, in terms of our relationships with the Russian Federation, It's business as usual. It continues. Not a single program in that relationship has stopped.
But what about the agricultural sector of the country? Has that been affected negatively?
No, it has not been affected negatively. Remember, Fiorella, grain, wheat in particular, it's not a staple food in our part of the world. Corn is the staple food. If there is shortage of corn, because corn is the main staple food of the majority of people in our country, so it has not affected us the way it has affected, for example, the Maghreb countries, Egypt in particular, which imports about 98% of its grain needs from Russia. So with us in South Africa, no, it has not.
Well, following reports on joint military drills, there have been discussions on further cooperation between Russia and South Africa. How are things going within that sphere?
Again, there, on the joint naval exercises that are going to take place between South Africa, China, and Russia, it is not a new thing, Fiorella, as we will recall. And I would expect that it will still continue in the coming years. And again, we have to stress that South Africa has got such exercises with almost all the countries, the US, France, a number of African countries. So again, those joint exercises between Russia, China, and South Africa will continue.
Well, speaking about multilateral cooperation, you mentioned the BRICS group earlier, and the BRICS group of the countries was in the international spotlight throughout last year with talks of new members and an overall strengthening of cooperation within the bloc. How do you foresee the future of this group?
Well, it's not even the future, Fiorella. The present has already started, as you would recall. In January, South Africa ascended as chairperson of the BRICS group, and we are having the BRICS summit, which will be in South Africa in August. A number of activities. Our BRICS team, for example, is already busy now interacting on the preparations for the summit. It's important also to note that already an invitation has been sent to President Vladimir Putin to attend the summit in August.
And are there plans for cooperation with Russia in the energy sector? Can Moscow help the energy crisis that South Africa may be battling?
Again, as I was saying earlier, Fiorella, it's business as usual, and it has been so. We in the mission here in Moscow have been seized in interacting with the major players in the Russian Federation, Gazprom, Roshydro, and a number of them. Just now, as we speak, we are in touch with a number of these Russian energy companies on cooperation with South African energy companies.
So business as usual, you say. South Africa is going to reinstate flights to Russia in the near future. How will this affect tourism? Do many people from South Africa visit Russia? And vice versa?
If you again, Fiorella, if you recall, it was in 2017, 2018, when the 90-day free visa waiver was agreed between the two countries. What was the intention? The intention here was to allow the free movement of people. That is why today, South Africans who want to visit Russia do not need to go to the Russian embassy for visas. The same is with Russians who want to go to South Africa. You can go, buy your ticket now, go to South Africa, stay there on a visitor's visa for 90 days. Now, what was the intention of this visa waiver? interaction, relationship between people to people, that is the Russian people and the South African people, included in the basket of objectives is to encourage tourism. You mentioned briefly that on the question of the direct flight, if you recall, it was in February 2022, where it was agreed that the direct flight will start the following month. But unfortunately, that delayed. There are discussions as we speak to restart the direct flight, and we are expecting, as it was agreed last year, that there would be 4 flights. 4 flights a week, to and fro. 2 flights would be from Moscow to Johannesburg and Moscow to Cape Town. Mm-hmm. Now, that's going to be major because Russians love Cape Town. Of course, everybody loves Cape Town. It's our hub for tourism. Let us face it, one of our most beautiful cities.
Strengthening good relationships continue. Thank you, Ms. Maketka, South African ambassador to the Russian Federation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fiorella. It's my pleasure. And thank you to your viewers.